All right, so that seems to be like the downside. Is there a positive impact that the standard gauge railway is likely to have? That conversation is what Abby is just about to have with Dr. John Musingi, who is a senior lecturer at the University of Nairobi, and also Sydney Kuntai, who is the chair for Kenya Coalition for Wildlife Conservation and Management. Abby, take it away.
Well, many thanks there, Joy. And let's just dive right into this interview. And gentlemen, you're not new to this issue around the SGR. Of course, there's been a lot of hue and cry, especially from the environmentalists. Perhaps let me just rope in Mr. Kantai. Looking at this environmental impact assessment report, there are so many holes that your organization has sort of raised in this report. Perhaps, what are some of the two critical issues that stand out for you?
Well, without going into too many details, first, the process was not right. There's a process that is supposed to be followed when you are doing an environmental impact assessment study. That was not followed. And three critical things I would say. The first thing that should have happened would have been a resettlement plan that should have been done before even the study. Okay. Because if you are going to disrupt the lives of people where you are intending to put up a project and you do not involve them, you don't consult them, you go right ahead to do a study, that is against the law. It is against the process that is required for that study to be concluded.
So are you simply saying that they did not follow due process? Because the president, when they were launching phase 2 of the standard gauge in Mbulbul around Kajiado County, he was very categorical, saying the park, the standard gauge will actually pass through the park. They've already done the assessment and everything will be intact. Is this true?
That is absolutely not true, because the study bears out our side of the story. Because I don't want to go into the details of what the president said, what he did not say, but I can say for sure that he was misled. Because a feasibility study should have been done. It wasn't done. He was given the wrong information. It was also wrong for him to do the launching, because as he was doing it, already there's a matter that is in court. There's a matter that we are actually going to go to the tribunal this afternoon at 4 o'clock, which stopped any activity on the standard gauge railway from Nairobi to Naivasha.
And Dr. Musingi, perhaps looking at this critical aspect around the SGR, the government said, looking at the alternatives, other routes would be extremely expensive when it comes to compensation, and they eventually settled on cutting through the park, and it's basically 6 kilometers. And looking at the designs of the railway, it is elevated, the elephants can cross, the giraffes. I don't know, a lot of noise coming out from the lobby groups, from an academic. Did we follow the due process?
Not really. I think if we come to the issue of cost, I think cost area is neither here nor there, because nobody has done cost analysis of, for example, losing or degrading Nairobi National Park. So basically, the issue of cost is neither here nor there, basically, unless you're assuming that, the park does not, is of no value. But we know that the park has quite a lot of value. Its value is...
It's a national asset.
It's a national asset. It's something for posterity.
So looking at the railway going through the park, there are concerns around the noise the railway would create, and of course the impact this will have on the wildlife, and also, as you know, 1,000 meters within the park, that's the distance that the wildlife usually don't get to the fence.
Exactly.
So what are your concerns around
our concern is
the feasibility of this?
Our concern is the park is going to be divided into like 2 portions, and you may find wildlife in one side and the other side, and then they may not be really, a lot of species may not want really to come near there. So essentially you have squeezed the park, you have made it more smaller. And that is our major concern, and that is called habitat fragmentation. Because, and look here, you know, even that being alone, the aesthetic value, you know, you don't go to a park to see a train. You go there to see wildlife in their natural environment. This is the park where all the kids from Kenya go to see wildlife.
The only
in their
park
natural
within
environment.
a city.
The only park within a city. So it's very vital. It's very important for posterity, for, you know, so it needs to be really conserved.
So how affected will the wildlife be, especially when you're looking at the migratory routes that they usually follow, and also the interbreeding, and also just generally, will this have an impact on their survival at the park?
Exactly, because the more you make it smaller, the more you encourage inbreeding, and therefore degrading genetic value of the species there. So essentially, and then again, you make it smaller, you're also increasing like some conflicts within even some species of animals, because a lot of those species have their own their own territory within there.
All right.
So if you cut it smaller, you're now bringing them together, and that can be very bad.
All
you
right.
know, yeah. Lions, for example, a pride of lion will not has its own territory. They can never cross there because the other one has its own owners. Even gazelles, you know, they have their own area.
That's
You
true.
don't cross there.
Okay.
So now we are saying we are squeezing the park. We're making it smaller. And that is not good for it. Can we pass this railway line elsewhere, surely?
So just paint for us a picture.
Yes.
If this was to go on despite the protests,
Yes.
how would Nairobi National Park look like after 5 years if the railway goes through the park?
We believe it will be really island degraded, and it will be a kind of a slow death. It may not happen immediately, but it's a slow death that will continue over time. Yeah, and with due course, the park may have very little value, you know, as a park, because a park has some its characteristics.
That's true.
Exactly.
And Kantai, perhaps as we get to your closing thoughts, what then would be the best alternative? Because as we speak, the contractor is mobilizing equipment. They want to start works. The last time was in Mbulbul. That was about a month ago. They seem undeterred by your protests. It's like things will go on.
Well, let me just put it clearly here that if the Director General of NEMA decides to grant a license to the Kenya Railways to proceed with the work, I can assure you we'll be back in court, because that report that is before NEMA is flawed. It has serious negative impacts that will affect the park, and the law is very clear. When you challenge the study and you have reasons, valid reasons to actually defer that project or ensure that it doesn't use the route that they are insisting, then that is the way it should be. We are prepared. We are not going to give up. Initially, we were doing protests. Now we are looking at the reports and the viability of that route. We have an alternative route, that is route number 8, from Konza, Konabaridi, all the way. That is a better route. Even the cost analysis we have done, the lie that the government of Kenya keeps on yapping all the time that going through the park is cheaper, that is not true. Because if they were to tell you how much it will cost to compensate the people who are going to lose their land on the side of outside the park where it will exit going all the way to Rongai, that is much more expensive than doing the railway through the park. Otherwise, we believe that the due process must be followed. NEMA is supposed to look at that study and our comments, and we had a public hearing last week on Friday, and 90% of those who made presentations and submissions are opposed totally to that report and to the railway being through the park. Therefore, they have 90 days, not 1 day, not 2 weeks, 90 days to react to that report. And if within 90 days they do not want to follow the science that is in there and the truth that we have come up with because we've done our studies, it will be a big shame for this country, because it will be using force to destroy Nairobi National Park. We do not need to destroy Nairobi National Park at the expense of an SGR railway that can be passed elsewhere, not necessarily through Nairobi National Park. My closing comment here is that unless there's an ulterior, sinister motive to grab Nairobi National Park, to make it a real estate, because that is what people who have no interest whatsoever in conservation, who do not value our wildlife, who do not value Nairobi National Park and other parks. The minute you allow Nairobi National Park to be, misused and abused, any other park in this country is at risk. The next thing you'll hear is Hell's Gate will be, raped. Nakuru will be raped. And I'm saying raped because that is actually interfering with the natural habitat. That's a natural habitat that you're destroying. It will be a very bad thing for this country.
Make it brief, Dr. Your closing thoughts?
And perhaps even, I think SGR needs to improve its PR, because even now some issues are coming about Savo. The Parliamentary Committee on Environment and Natural Resources,
yes,
their report is saying that, they displaced the routes where the wildlife crosses. So, and created new ones.
Yeah.
Now, wildlife are not people. They cannot be told just now change the route here and go to the other. We have put it, 5 kilometers ahead.
Yeah, like the elephants.
Like the elephants,
to one
they stick. They're very, serious on. They stick to there over generations. So now already Savo is raising issues. Now, surely let's not go again and destroy the other park.
Okay.
Already the SGR, when they were even coming to Syokimau station, they were even cutting again the park. When there was still alternative to stay a little bit out, why not follow even the old railway line, which has a wayleaf for around 30 meters? But they were still wanting to get in. I think it's like the park has no value. So these are things we are saying, really, And there's also another issue emerging, that Lake Magadi is already now getting, degraded because of soil erosion, being washed from the area where they are drilling the tunnel, now going to the Lake Magadi. And soon, maybe we may not even produce soda ash.
Interesting.
That's a business issue. Yeah.
Well, many thanks, gentlemen. Very pertinent issues there you're raising against the environmental impact assessment. And of course, it raises a lot of questions. Do we have development, or do we consult, or do we do both? Well, that's the nexus that Kenya is at during this critical implementation of the standard gauge railway, which promises to cut down the transport costs by about 40%. Well, that brings us to the end of that interview, but coming up shortly, we'll be speaking about humanitarian response and some of the digital approaches that you can take. Joy Dorian Bira will be having that conversation shortly with Philip Ogola just after this break.